welcome to another episode of Let's Talk with Greg and
Thomas.
So yeah, this week we have on Ally Dulcimer, who is running for Congress in Virginia, and we're gonna basically be talking about the latest their new governor and how we even got there. So it's an exciting show, isn't it, Thomas? Exciting.
Yeah, it'd be good. It'd be good actually to talk about this because I'm not completely up to speed with what's fully going on in Virginia.
A lot of shit's happening in Virginia.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so this will be a good discussion.
Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the discussion. Hey everyone, and give a warm welcome to Ally Dulcimer. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Greg. I'm really excited to be here with you and Thomas tonight.
Yeah. So I mentioned before you're running for Congress in Virginia's, is it 11th district?
Virginia's 11th district, which is Fairfax County, just outside of Washington, D.C.
So go ahead and talk about a little bit about your campaign before we talk about our discussion.
Sure. So we're fully grassroots, of course, not taking any corporate PAC or dark money, people driven, running on a platform for universal health care, which 80% of Democrats support and some, lesser number of Republicans support. I think that number changes all the time. I did spend my entire career working as a natural resources professional in program management and policy. So obviously, environment is a huge part of our platform. I also have two kids, and when they were young and I was early in my career, really struggled to try and do daycare while working full time and all the rest of it. And there was actually 1 year where I spent more in daycare than I brought home in my paycheck.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and I did that because I knew that my career was on a trajectory where I would eventually continue to, grow my salary and, of course, public schools, right? So, I really think we need universal pre-K. I also think we need universal elder care. My mother right now is ill. She's been staying with us some, and she's back in the hospital, unfortunately, right now. But trying to figure out what to do because she's not going to be on her own. I don't have the time to be a 24/7 caregiver for her.
Well, you know what? I think that should be included with Social Security.
Yeah, I think we should expand either Social Security or Medicare to include whatever is logistically makes sense from a bureaucratic standpoint in terms of mechanisms and how those are run.
Yeah, and it's hard enough trying to get them to add eyeglasses, vision, and dental into Medicare. Can't even do that. So that's where we're at right now.
Right. And we need more people in Congress who support those things because the vast majority of Americans support those programs. But if you take the profit motive out, you guys know as well as I do, 33 cents of every healthcare dollar goes to the insurance companies for profit. That's a ridiculously huge middleman markup. And there's a huge incentive to keep costs low and maintain high profits. And people don't get preventative care and they end up in the emergency room. I hate the argument everyone has access, or everyone should have access to medical. We all have access.
Yeah.
Everyone could go to the emergency room. My husband went through cancer treatments. Let me tell you, that was over $100,000, and he had good insurance. He had an 80/20 plan. 20% of $100 and some thousand is still a lot of money.
Wow.
So, it's one of these things where we need to make sure that when you're talking about the public good, that those policies are being taken care of by the government. Otherwise, in the environment, we call it the tragedy of the commons, right? If something is benefiting everybody, but nobody is specifically responsible for it, nobody takes care of it, and you have a tragedy of the commons, meaning that resource falls by the wayside. So when you have things like education, healthcare, prison system, You know, all these things, these are common to everybody in the country and should be handled at, you know, at a national level, I think.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you are running
Thank
because,
you.
you know, we need more people, local, state and federal like you. Like we need people that actually care about us.
Up
So
and down
let's go
ticket for
ahead.
sure.
Exactly. So let's go ahead and start on our discussion, which is your new governor. Oh my God, I forgot his name again.
Glenn
Gavin
Youngkin.
Youngkin. Glenn Youngkin.
Glenn
I was gonna
Youngkin.
say Gavin. Gavin Newsom. Oi.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Oh God.
Yeah, that's a whole other discussion. But yeah, so Glenn Youngkin just became governor of Virginia, and I first want to talk about the race. Could you inform our audience how we even got there?
Absolutely. So I'll take it back a little bit. There were a lot of candidates who ran for the Democratic uh, nominee seat. And interestingly enough, this is a little bit of an aside, but within the Fairfax Democratic Party, they did this informal test of ranked choice voting among the available candidates and actually came up with a candidate who was not Terry McAuliffe. Isn't that interesting? They came up, this informal poll actually chose Jennifer McClellan, who's a longtime member of our state government, who honestly, I think if she or Jennifer Carroll Foy or a couple of the candidates probably could have beat Glenn Youngkin, but that's an aside. So Terry McAuliffe was the presumptive Democratic nominee for governor. He is good friends with the Clintons, comes out of that Clinton era political base. You know, very
oh
much.
Oh my God, that's already a red flag right there.
Well, you know, the problem is that I think a lot of especially older Democrats think that what worked in the past is what will work in the future. It's always worked in the past, so obviously it's going to work in the future, not taking into account that society has changed, people have changed. The situation in 2020 is not what it was in 1990 or even 2000, right? We're in a very different era now. In addition to which, all props to Glenn Youngkin. That man ran an awesome campaign. He appeared in sweater vests with multicultural people behind him, you know, and I'm going to show up at your backyard barbecue and I'm your friend. And oh, and there was this one, he's in a grocery store, he's holding a gallon of milk and he's like, I don't think mom should have to pay 4.5% of tax on the milk for their babies. So I'm going to cut the state tax. And then he started, his other one was, I started as a small businessman and with a couple friends, I was able to be successful because with hard work, we can do that. Now, his group is the Carlyle Group. He started with like $14 million and grew it into, you know, the Carlyle Group. Nobody knew in my neighborhood when I was talking with people about the race before the election, I was like, you know, people who are swing in my district, I would be like, hey, have you looked at all into what's going on? And they're like, yeah, I think I'm going to vote for Youngkin. I'm like, why do you want to vote for Youngkin? Well, he's going to cut the food tax and, you know, he's just a small businessman and he's really good. And I was like, you do realize he is on record as saying that he wants to overturn a woman's right to choose in Virginia. And they're like, what? No, I didn't know that. They didn't know anything about his policies. So Terry McAuliffe talked policies. He talked about the policies he wanted to put into place. Nobody cares about policies, right? There was an analogy someone made to me one time, which I thought was great. When you're running for politics, nobody wants to know how to make the brownies. They just want to see what the brownie's going to look like. They just want, here's the brownie. And Glenn Youngkin was like, here's the brownie, right? Here's the gallon of milk. I'm a small businessman. I'll show up at your backyard barbecue. I wear a sweater vest and I have lots of people of color with me. And, you know, he also, from what I've heard, treated his campaign workers very kindly and with respect. And I did not hear the same from McAuliffe. I have no firsthand knowledge of this whatsoever, but I did have a conversation with just one granted, just one volunteer, but she felt very dismissed. She didn't feel appreciated. She felt like a lot was being asked of her, and she never got a thank you. And people like to be thanked. So I don't know if that was just her situation or not. But the bottom line is that Glenn Youngkin ran a brilliant campaign, and Terry McAuliffe just didn't, just didn't. So it's unfortunate. I don't think he was probably the best candidate to go against Glenn Youngkin, that particular candidate. But it's water under the bridge.
The problem is Clinton as a politician is just no longer. It's like it's the biggest. A, it's a red flag, and B, it's poison. It's complete poison now. Like anyone attached to that campaign or to her particularly, or it's complete poison in the eyes of working class Americans. Like they especially Americans who are long time GOP supporters or like it's just poison. I remember during and it's a completely different subject, but I remember during the Brexit campaign in the UK, what the Brexit campaign did very successfully was they were able to, a bit like you described with Youngkin, like taking pictures with farmers and holding milk up, and they went down into city centres and they basically did community stuff. They got them into tailors and they gave them free suits. They put them into job interviews. Like this is how they built up a ground campaign of almost like it was like community service sort of stuff, but on the back it was backing a campaign which was horrendous, completely a right-wing take. But that's how they were able to do it, by basically appeasing to small working class people, like like these and this isn't new. It's just very organized, and they knew. And you're right, how they don't even have to say any policy. They didn't even have to say like what Brexit would cause. No, the amount of mudslinging that was going on, like nobody cared about what Brexit would do. They just for some reason wanted Brexit. Like you would talk to voters and they just wanted it because they felt it was the right thing. Or and like I said, it's a manufactured situation where you're running a campaign on policy, but your opponent has been very successful with completely diverting the conversation away from policy.
Yeah. And I think well, I was going to say, I think that was something that Donald Trump did very well.
Yes.
If you listen to how he campaigned as a populist. He ran to the left of Clinton by a long shot, and he was addressing the disenfranchised, typically white blue collar worker that had been really ignored. And now when he got into office, he didn't actually follow through on those promises. But if you listen to how he ran, I mean, he sounded great. So, it's
very disappointing. But I wanted to talk about the progressive that was running in this race and what happened at the debate.
Princess Blanding.
So go ahead and tell us the story. It was a wonderful story.
Yeah, so there was this was really interesting. So we had the Republican and the Democrat, and then we had an independent, Princess Blanding, who is progressive, a woman of color, really good on the policies, just really, really good, but running a grassroots campaign. Not, I don't know if you know, but Youngkin self-funded to the tune of like $75 million or something like that. And Mcauliffe, I was actually in a meeting where they were trying to get people to come to a fundraiser for him. And I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll go and listen to what he has to say. And I was like, okay, well, how much is it? And they're like, well, the minimum buy-in is 5,000. Terry won't show up unless the minimum buy-in is 5,000. And if it's only 5,000, there has to be at least 20 people going. I was like, okay, well, that's out of my price range. So these people were very, very well funded, television ads, print ads, the whole 9 yards. Princess Blanding is a grassroots candidate, really awesome, got the signatures, got on the ballot, all the rest of it. And when they had the debates, which is how most people ended up deciding who they were going to vote for, they watched the debates, right? And she should have been on the stage, and they refused to allow her a podium. Not only that, during the first debate, I was watching it, and there was some voice screaming from the crowd. You know, we couldn't understand what this person was saying. The moderator tried to ignore for a little bit, and then finally just cut to commercial. And when we came back, everything was fine. You know, the heckler had been taken care of, and the debate went on. Well, it turns out that that person was Princess Blanding, and what she was saying is, I am on the ballot. I have the signature. I am a valid candidate. I need to be on that stage. You have not allowed me to be on this stage. I want to be on this stage. And they escorted her out of the auditorium.
That is insane.
And the moderator never acknowledged who she was. So if you're watching at home and you don't know, because you're not, you know, following on Twitter or whatever, and you're not into progressive politics, all you know is there was a heckler who they took out. That's all you know. Not a valid, viable candidate who, yes, is running as a third party, but, you know, she deserves a voice. This is supposed to be a democracy.
Exactly. So. And we've talked about this, Thomas, before, that the Democrats like to talk about, let's save democracy, save democracy, save democracy, when they are also destroying it themselves by not letting third party candidates even participate in the electoral process.
Well, let's just look at the voting rights bill that's being pushed, right? It completely suppresses third parties, like completely. It takes third parties off the ballot, right? The supposable pro-democracy bill is just solidifying the two-party status. It's not. Yeah. So you know, like, I know people want voting rights, but the reality is, any voting rights bill needs to include the expansion of ranked choice voting and third parties. It needs to allow, but that doesn't benefit Democrats.
And not only that, they have to, if you are for any kind of voting rights, then you are also pro campaign finance and making sure that corporations can't be donating to candidates. They need to be publicly funded.
I agree.
So now that Glenn Youngkin is governor, you wanted to share basically his first executive orders. All right, so we have these executive actions pulled up. So go ahead and share with us what's happening right now.
Absolutely. So Glenn Youngkin ran on a bunch of promises, getting rid of masks, getting rid of critical race theory, etc. And so his very first day in office, he signed 9 executive orders and 2 executive directives that you have pulled up here. And if anyone wanted to click on the links, you could see the actual orders. I did click on them and read them all. The very first one, getting rid of critical race theory, you know, that's fabulous, except that critical race theory is not actually taught in our schools.
That was one of his biggest things during his campaign, was like, let the parents choose and make decisions, which I thought was just a bunch of BS. But go on, sorry I interrupted you.
You know, if the parent, I believe parents should be involved in their children's educational choices. And I think that if they're interested in influencing public school curriculum, they should go to the school board. They should provide their written comments, and if they want, they can run for school board. You know, that's certainly, they're free to do that. If, like, I have a neighbor who is, she's Catholic and she's very devout, and she does not hold with what goes on in the public schools, so she sends her child to a Catholic school, a private school. That is her choice. That is where parents can make the choice if they would like to do that. But parents cannot walk into a classroom and tell a teacher what to teach or not teach. And what's happening with this concept of critical race theory is that there's a lot of disinformation out there. And one of the things that is happening is parents being unhappy with books in libraries like Lawn Boy, or coming of age stories. And they also think that having incorporating authors like Maya Angelou or Toni Morrison is somehow critical race theory because the authors are Black. So it's a very bizarre kind of reinterpretation. It's not critical race theory, but it is an attempt to maintain a certain amount of racism in our educational curriculum, which folks are trying to get beyond. The second one, which was really the most important one that for me was this children wearing masks in schools and getting rid of the mask mandate in schools. All the county school systems have put out that it is still their policies to wear schools. And yet my daughter is a high school senior and she has friends who are like, I'm not wearing a mask, blah, blah, blah. There is already a critical shortage of teachers, so much so that several people reached out to my son, who is taking a gap year to work on the campaign so that he would help with substitute teaching. And so he went through the process and became a substitute teacher. I have an 85-year-old mother who has advanced COPD. And because children are now saying they're not going to wear masks, he is saying he's not going to be able to substitute teach. And that is having a ripple effect. There are a lot of teachers who are like, I'm not teaching because I have, immunocompromised families, or I myself immunocompromised. And so it's a real problem. The other thing he's doing is getting rid of masks in businesses. He wants to open business for Virginia is open for business, get rid of all of the unnecessary COVID restrictions, unnecessary, however he determines that. He also wants to establish what's it called? It's a Commonwealth Chief Transformation Officer, because he said that the Virginia Employment Commission and the DMV are not doing a good job. So he wants to increase accountability and transparency. But more importantly, this is a person who would report directly to the governor and have broad authority about how all of the state agencies across government is run, which just is a little scary for me, given his other appointments, right? Like his appointments, like he appointed Trump's former head of EPA, Trump's former EPA, Wheeler, as head of the state's natural resources division. He's appointed this woman, Elizabeth Schultz, who is, on record as being anti-LGBTQIA, anti-choice, anti-everything, as the new education czar. His diversity officer is someone from the Heritage Foundation. I mean, it's just on and on. I think Virginia is in for a really rough 4 years, to be honest. And I'm scared that instead of embracing what 80% of Democrats in this country want, which is universal health care, universal child care, strong environmental action that I'm running on, they're going to be like, oh, no. We have to stay with what we know worked in the past, which is what they did with Mcauliffe. And if they do that in our district, then the incumbent's going to stay, which means, he's in the top 10 for taking money from companies that profit from war, votes for every war. His biggest donor is also a company that he has almost $500,000 of investments in. I mean, he says a lot of the right things, but it's not what will win. So, our district is heavily Democratic, but we have got to move forward. We've got to move this country forward if we're going to actually not become one red mass.
Yeah, it's very scary. Thomas, go ahead.
And unfortunately, this benefits the Democrats, because the reality is that you have someone like Youngkin who is awful, like horrendously awful, and they weaponize that to tell you to go vote for someone like Terry McAuliffe, who is also terrible, but not quite as terrible. And we keep doing this. We keep rehashing this over and over.
It's the consequence of choosing between two evils.
Yeah.
I think it's a consequence of fear. I think people are afraid of change. Change can be hard. Change is scary. Change by definition is uncomfortable, but we have to lean into the change. We have to be brave. We have to face the fact that this world is different. And we need to move forward and not dwell in the past with past mistakes and keep repeating. It's the Einstein thing. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome. We're not going to get a different outcome if we don't embrace change. Take that leap of faith, jump, embrace a more forward-leaning agenda that is people driven, that is environment driven, and that will truly benefit all people regardless of party. It's not just Democrats who are having a hard time. Republicans are having a hard time. People are suffering from COVID, from low wages, from lack of health care. That's not a party or political issue. That's a human issue. It's a human condition issue, and we need to embrace that and move forward and stop bickering.
So we're sadly getting close to the end, but thank you so much for joining on and having this discussion. People are just living their everyday lives and they don't know what's happening around the country, and how an issue like Medicare for All can help everyone in the country, not just a certain state. Virginia needs it. California needs it. Wisconsin, Vermont, Connecticut. I can go on. There's 50 of them. So, thank you again. Can you shout out your social media and your campaign?
Yes, thank you. And thank you both for allowing me this opportunity. The time went actually really fast, so maybe we can do it again sometime. Yes, my website is allyforcongress.com. That's ALLYFOR Congress.com. You can follow us on Twitter at @AllyForCongress. And if you're so inclined and you've got a few extra dollars, we are fully grassroots, no corporate PAC money, and my opponent rather is very well funded. If you have a few bucks, $5, $10, if you're flush, the max is $2,900, just saying. But if you want to throw a few bucks our way, we could absolutely use it and put it to very good use to try and make true substantive change here in Virginia and in the nation.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you for joining us. You are always welcome.
Thank you both. I very much enjoyed it.
And everyone, thank you for watching another episode of Let's Talk with Greg and
Thomas.
All right, and we'll see you next Monday. Take care.